It's thinking right now. It's being slow. There we go. We're live. We're live over here too. We got dual and streams going on right now. So
dual streams. All right, y'all. We're trying something different today. 2 podcasts at one time.
Yep. So Scott Brent with the Journey Beyond Divorce, and I've got a special co-host today, Garrett Goggans. He does have his own podcast too. I'll let him talk about that a little bit, but we decided to team up today because my normal co-host, Miriam, said she had some other stuff going on. So I was like, hey, go do what you need to. I'll find somebody that will jump on here. And so now we're going dual stream here. So it's very interesting.
It is very interesting. And so you got me with moving upstream without a paddle. Did you guys see Scott before? He's been on here quite a few times with Miriam and then with Patrick. So we're really just kind of kicking off the 30 days of podcasting, podcasting every single day.
I've got another one, though, because Patrick and I, with Two Native Sons, we have another podcast that we're launching. So everything that we've done with the Dreamer Cypher, that's what we're stripping down. But that one, we have called it Silence the Inner Fucker. So it's one of those things that it's just having the real conversations, showing up unscripted, being true, real, and just being yourself and whatnot.
Right.
So it's one of those very unique things, but we both are working together as the collaborative units. And so we do have to give a shout out to our first sponsor with everything that we're doing, Tabala Mexican Cuisine. Jasper Axelrad runs that truck. So give her a shout out. I actually hung out with her last night. Saw her in her zone. She was working with Black Hat Distillery in regards to some different things with planning process for stuff coming down the pipeline with Colorado and the fun aspect of COVID and whatnot. But I want to give a shout out to her. Had some King's Chicken quesadilla last night. Whew, that was delicious. So we want to thank Jasper for just jumping on and trusting us. And we just look at it as another way to really give full exposure to a lot of people on a platform that a lot of people don't understand, or they look at it and they're kind of scared when it comes to podcasting. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I remember when you had started your own.
I was freaked out.
That first conversation, you're like, I've spent a whole day on 24 seconds and I don't know what to do.
The 2-minute intro took me about 3-4 hours, and yeah. So, but growth is good. It's a good thing. Growth.
Mm-hmm. So, Gary, you've gone through a divorce, and you are married now. But what was your experience like when you went through that divorce process?
So mine was probably a little bit different than most, because not only did I go through a divorce, I went through getting laid off. And so I was kind of combating the two at the same time. So that whole time period was really a blur, right? So it was April of 2009. My ex-wife, my wife at the time, just informed me that she wanted a divorce. And then in November of 2009, and within Colorado, you have to go through this 90-day period of the divorce aspects. And my divorce actually didn't finalize until January of 2010. So I had to deal with both of those, November being laid off and then going through the divorce at the same time. So it was a whole lot of a blur. But what I do remember is that I didn't want to go through the divorce in a way that was going to be extremely bitter, because we have the boys, our kids, and we both didn't want it to be this argument, this match about who's going to do what and who's going to do this, and we really just wanted to make it as simple as possible and just work together. And it actually got to the point where we, flat out told the judge and everybody at the things like, we're doing it our way. This is the way we want to do it. We've come up with an agreement. And, the judge kind of gave us some pushback on that. Like, are you sure this is what you want? And like, yeah, this is definitely what we want. And so it was very amicable, really, the divorce, that part. but there's just other aspects, that we've talked about, and I think we talked about amongst different groups, that you just go through this whole, dude, I suck. Because not only am I going through divorce, I got laid off, and I'm about as worthless can be, right?
Woo.
So that, it was a pretty tough time.
And it's a unique approach when you look at that, because I know Miriam's talked in regards to the whole aspect. She's like, why does the state have to be involved in everything that I do? Why do they need to know everything? And I know that was the big thing that she was very, very angry on. But with you talking, you guys talked to the judge, said this is what we want to do. And the judge was like, are you sure? It's like, no, we're just telling you this to freaking, I don't know, maybe you'll feel good about yourself. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people feel that way, but I believe that the reason why the state and courts get involved, and they're really, is because not everybody is going to go through that. Divorces can be ugly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not as simple as some people, like as my ex and I made it out to be, or as Miriam and her ex put it out to be. Some of them are just downright nasty.
Yeah.
And so you need this person to come in as a mediator and kind of sort out the bullshit, right? Just, okay, you can go stand in your corner, you can go stand in your corner. This is the way it's going to happen. And I think sometimes it just, when you're going through the process, depending on whatever judge or whomever you get, they don't necessarily distinguish the fact that not all divorces are going to be that way.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's one of those things. It's the whole experience. You start getting jaded, and like the court systems, like we go through all these divorces all the time. And then I think sometimes it could be they have this worst case scenario idea in their mind of everything going to blow up. And then they get somebody that's like, no. And then it really surprises them and catches them off guard. And they're like, are you sure?
Are you sure? Yeah, this is exactly what we want. Yeah. And I mean, we set out, it was a very interesting divorce. Very interesting. I mean, we actually used the same lawyer. It was because we really, all we needed a lawyer for was just to get through the red tape, right? To do the paperwork. Yeah. And so he was just basically, you just realize that if you guys argue, I'm done. I can't do the two of you. So we just really lucked out, and we really set out. And I think that even afterwards, we kind of said, we're going to do things in a certain way, and all because of the kids and how we wanted the kids to. And were we perfect at that? No, not at all. There were times that arguments happened because, again, divorce is just a stressful situation, and at that time in 2009, the economy was crap. She had lost her job just before, and then I lost mine, and so we're trying to get finances figured out and going through it was a terrible time.
And I know, as long as I've known you, it's interesting to see the transformation that has taken place for you, and so. I've talked and I've brought this up that the story that I had to deal with was I'm not worthy. And so I don't know if that was the same story that you had dealt with, or what was your thought process in regards to the story that you had and now where you're at with really tearing that down to being a mindset coach.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I like I said, I felt completely just like, and not even so much unworthy, but like I didn't have anything to offer, right? And so I really got into this place where I didn't think very highly of me as a person, and not because I was a bad person by any means, but just like I really had nothing to offer, the workforce or a relationship, and I really kind of went into this shell at that point and just was very, very withdrawn, right? And not so quick to get into relationships or anything like that. And it wasn't until, years later. So we're talking, my whole transition started in 2018, and I really ramped it up in 2019. So you're talking 10 years later, I was walking, 10 years, I was walking in this mindset of I really have nothing to offer the world. I mean, I had gotten a job and I was great at my job, awesome work ethic. So I was going through all that. But then in relationships, I didn't really feel like I had much. And then, I mean, just for full transparency too, because then my current wife and I, that showed up in our relationship. And not really to put myself out into that relationship. And so it's really interesting how a divorce says, how you deal with what you currently have. And so we went through a lot of trials and tribulations. You're over there laughing.
I'm laughing because we got Patrick Massey over here giving shout outs. So he first says 2 native sons, all caps with all exclamation points. And then he's giving a shout out to you to no paddle needed.
No paddle needed.
Shout out to Patrick joining on this one. That's why I was laughing over here because Patrick, he one time we were doing the round table and I was doing a watch party. So anybody that's watching this, go ahead and share it. Share it as a watch party. Just know that I won't see the comments. But that was something that I was listening to today for Travis Brown, who's big in podcasting. He was saying that while you're live streaming, let people know, hey, share it, because the best way for us to grow, it's not the reviews that people leave, it's actually sharing it. Because he's like, if you have an average audience listeners of 500 each episode and 10% shares your podcast, that's 50 new people potentially that hears it. And so anybody that's watching this, the biggest thing for us is it's the sharing piece, especially with the podcast. It's all word of mouth. Legitimately, that's how it grows and whatnot. But it's funny because I've seen this before. I've in some different groups, Tony Robbins group dealing with singles and whatnot. And there's a woman that's always on there talking about how she's like, why does my ex-spouse get to be happy? Why did he get in a new relationship? And I just feel like I'm not worthy of anything. And so like that whole conversation, like you talked about, you went from the divorce, got into your new, current marriage, and it kind of mirrored itself. But I think it's that mindset piece that is huge with getting in and destroying that. So that way it doesn't come with you. And so with everything that you're doing with the transitional period and getting into the mindset piece as a mindset coach, now that you see that, because you did have a friend that you talked to was going through potentially thinking about calling it quits with his wife, you sat down and talked to them and they had a change of perspective or a change in mindset or whatever it was. So where you're at now, and for individuals that are watching this, listening to this, what advice or what would you suggest to them as individuals if they're on this journey beyond divorce, or even I would say even people that are in a new relationship or that are currently married? What would you suggest or what would you maybe bring up to them?
I think we'll go with the into the new relationship, because I think it's an important aspect. And you because I listen to your podcast quite frequently. You talk about this a lot, where the most important thing that even I had to realize, and I've talked with my current wife about, is that we, as a couple, we need to stop thinking that we have to complete each other. And really the way you say it, it's like I knew that, right? It was in the back of my head. I knew that, but I still felt like, coming from a divorce, you're wanting to do everything you possibly can to make this thing work, but it's all in the wrong aspect. And if you can't get yourself together first, there's no way you're going to get the relationship together. And so we, with whatever problems that we've gone through the current marriage, has definitely been, we can't rely on each other to complete the other person, because the sheer stress about failing in that aspect is like, especially since you've been through a divorce already. And so, with my current wife, this is her first marriage, like the first time being married. But when you've gone through a divorce, to put that on somebody to say, I have to complete this other person, but I failed in my first relationship, how much more so do you really need to separate that and say, look, I'm going to complete myself. I'm going to do whatever I can to make myself happy with me, because how can I expect you to be happy with me if I'm not happy with myself, right?
Yeah.
And so we've had these conversations, and we do kind of have our own little, she's going after her business and going and doing that, and I'm going after mine, and then we're just meeting in the middle. We bounce ideas off of each other, and it's what makes that relationship work. Because then again, you're complementing each other. You have a mastermind group within your marriage, and not a reliance group within the marriage. And it's as you would say, Scott, it's a beautiful thing.
And it's one of those things, because I was listening to a podcast on the way over here, and it was John Kim, who he calls himself the Angry Therapist, and he ends up talking about we have to redefine love, because you have to look at it, and it's what new experiences do you want? You got to look at it and say, okay, what experiences do I want from this, instead of what type of person do I want? It's what experiences do I want to attain from this relationship, this experience piece. And then he said that, and this really kind of blew me away, and it kind of punched me in the face too. He's like, you know what? You really don't know what's healthy until you've gone through something that's unhealthy.
Right.
And I was like, oh man. But that's the thing though, when you start looking at that, some people will not do the work and go through the shit and the muck to say, okay, what do I need to learn from that current situation or the previous situation? And what do I need to bring forward coming into that new relationship, the new piece and whatnot? And then he talks about people will go from one situation to the next, slowly pad it up, and they don't really do the work. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny, because I've heard people talk about, well, my ex, they got a house, they got nice cars, I see them, and I was listening and I held up my finger, and the person's like, I know what you're going to say. But they continue to talk, and then I was like, okay, what was I going to say? And they were like, well, how do you know they're truly happy?
Right.
I was like, well, if you knew the question and knew the answer, what's your perspective? What are you doing here?
Right. Well, and that's true though, because and that's not even just in failed relationships or what. That's in any in friends. I just had a conversation with my kids the other day about teenage kids can be pretty mean, pretty ruthless, and you have to think about before you go off and assume that somebody can handle something you're saying to them. You have no idea what's going on up in their mind or in their heart, for that matter. So he or she may look happy, but there's another aspect too, that even in relationships, our self-image is only going to let us go so far. And so why do we keep going back to the same type of person? Because we believe that's the only kind of person that we're worthy of having. And so if your ex-spouse is stuck in that cycle, they probably aren't happy.
Yeah, and it's it's just one of those shocking things, but it's also the fact that it's a lot of the internal work. Like I tell people, you got to make yourself happy. This saying I really dislike a lot, times 1,000, is happy wife, happy life. I'm like, you cannot. No, we gotta quit this shit. It's like, who said this was? Hey, this is a great saying. I'm like, oh well, somebody that was freaking not sure about themselves, and they're relying on the other person to freaking make them happy and whatnot. And I'm like, and then just look at how that gets passed down generation to generation. And then if there's nothing that cuts it off, that's just a vicious cycle that we just constantly see over and over and over again. And that relationship piece, you've got to figure out, you've got to cut it off. And so the shit that happened and you don't like, you've got to figure out, okay, this is the experiences that I need to learn. This is the experience that I need to grow from. But how many people really want to do that? That's the toughest part.
Well, yeah. I think people want the change. They don't want to put in the work to do it. And really the effort isn't like huge. I mean, to overwrite the programming, I actually had a conversation on a previous podcast that's going to be released probably tomorrow. The general, I, even in my mind, with where I've come and I've come so far, even my mind was like to reprogram you as a person is going to take time. And he flat out said, no, it doesn't. Think about how you reset your phone back to factory mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the press of the button, and the coding aspect is there. Reprogramming you doesn't have to be intensive. It doesn't have to take years and decades. It can be more of an instantaneous type of thing, but it's all up here, right?
Yeah.
Until you can get this right, nothing else is going to flow.
Yeah, and I think that's powerful too. But it's also like a lot of people are like, "This isn't what I want in the next relationship." You should be focusing on this is what I want in the next relationship, because what you focus on expands.
Right.
But it's funny because you've got to understand people look at life through a different lens. They're looking at different things, so you've got to understand the lens that they're looking from is what drives them.
Right.
And don't get mad and whatnot. But I have to laugh because it's just like people are so hard pressed on their stance that they don't want to step off and look at it from a different direction, potentially because they have to look in the mirror,
right,
and be like, "Shit, this was my doing."
Right. Well, and it always is, right? There's just because. I mean, it's so easy to pass the blame and say my relationship failed because my spouse cheated on me.
Mm.
Okay, well, was there a reason? I mean, and I'm not saying that there has to be. I'm just saying, you can go back and be like, was there not enough time spent? Were you a workaholic and so she went somewhere, or vice versa? I mean, there's always two sides to every story, and to really kind of understand that there's a relationship takes two people, so that two people are involved in the actions. So stop pointing the finger and say, okay, well, what role did I play in it, and how can I change my paradigm part of it?
That's the biggest thing, but it's also going into the relationship and understanding that it's 100-100, because you'll have people that will go in 50-50. Well, if you get in a fight, it's 100% that you're trying to delve out here. And it's like, okay, you are 53% responsible. I'm only 47% responsible for this. Right. And the other person's like, screw you, buddy. No, this is not my doing. And so if you go in with that idea of 100-100, then the fight's going to be a lot less because you're 100% responsible. They're 100% responsible and whatnot.
Right. And that, definitely with my current marriage, there's something that we figured out, and it's taken us a while. Is when we do get into an argument or a fight, and we're both pretty headstrong, so our fights are pretty good. But we look at it and we say, when we come back together after that, we can pinpoint, this is where I went wrong, and she said, and this is where I went wrong, and I'm sorry about that. Instead of lashing out or deflecting or whatever psychological term you want to throw out there. I had my part in that argument, and it could have been diffused, but I chose to do this. Yeah. And then the reaction, and she chose to do that, and blah, and it just goes from there. So yeah, it's you're both 100% responsible 100% of the time.
Yeah. Well, and I find this interesting. So like I pulled out a couple of books that I'm reading and whatnot. This one is Moonshots, Creating a World of Abundance by Naveen Jain. And some of this, he talks about quantum physics and all that, and they were talking that they've seen experiments that they've seen waves actually travel back in time. I was like, oh, it took me 5 times to read that in about 15 minutes to really simmer. And I was like, okay, it makes sense, because when you start expanding your mind, you start looking at things differently. You start tearing down the paradigms that may have been stuck in your head. You can start looking at things differently and be like, okay, it does kind of make sense. I still don't fully understand, but it does. And they're like, think about it. You could potentially have the cause before the effect. I was like, oh my goodness. But in here, he's talking about our mindset is a mind-boggling, powerful entity. It is entirely responsible for the world we've created. And people are like, I didn't create this. No, your thoughts did. And it will define the world we'll live in tomorrow. In the end, we will realize either the world we fear to imagine or the world we dare to dream. And I was like, no way. So anybody that's listening, that will be in the show notes. I'll put an affiliate link. That way you can go check out the book. I highly suggest people really need to start reading and whatnot.
Oh, they do.
But the sad fact is a lot of people read less than a full book a year, which I don't understand. But that's also me. I'm a very vivacious reader. I've along with Moonshots, I've also got this one by Jay Shetty. Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day.
I tried to, because I hated reading. And I started getting to the personal development. I started reading books, and then I began to love it. And then understanding, the paradigm aspect, I always go, and if you know anything about a paradigm, is when we say I hate reading, it's just an opinion.
Mm.
And you don't really.
Yeah.
You have somewhere in your past that told yourself enough times, and I took it back to when I was in school because I didn't want to do the work. I wanted to go outside and do whatever. So I didn't want to, I didn't want to do the reading assignment. So I started telling myself that I hate reading. I hate reading. I hate reading. And it just kind of stuck with me. And then it just like anything, like we're talking about with the mindset, when you flip that and you start telling yourself, actually reading is not so bad. I quite enjoy reading. And whether you believe you do or not, your subconscious mind is going to kick in and go, okay, we like to read. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So
it's so surprising because the thing is, people have to understand that by reading, it is a way to cut down your learning curve. You're learning from somebody's experience maybe of 30 years. But I laugh because I'll see people that are like, what's the best relationship book I should read? I'm like, the best relationship book would be getting into the personal development realm and working on yourself. But it's one of those crazy things that people are always trying to find an answer, trying to find something. And when I look at the relationship piece, your gift that's really going to strengthen the relationship is by getting into personal development and working on yourself. Because if you're working on yourself, you're going to give permission to the other person that, hey, it's okay that you can also grow. But John Kim, he said this was also very mind-boggling too. He's like, when you get to the point where you're both comfortable, that's actually a detriment to you, because without any like pain or anything like that, you're not growing.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, because think about how many people have a comfortable relationship because they look at fighting as being a bad thing. And if people would look at it that when you're in a mode of fighting, it's not you versus the other person. It's you working together as a team, facing this problem to try to figure out a solution together. Right. But you have a lot of people within a relationship that will fight and blame the other person because they don't want to take responsibility, or it's too hard because they're like, shit, now maybe I'm the issue and I've got to look in the mirror and say, what can I do differently and whatnot. But yeah, it's just for anybody that gone through the divorce, in a marriage, relationship, you're by yourself right now, I highly suggest getting into the world of personal development. And every day just reading 10 pages a day. If that, and just starts taking that information and start growing and whatnot.
Well, so what did Jim Quick says that if you read 45 minutes a day, you can read a book a week.
Yep.
And then just to go back a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that this was somebody on your podcast before that said, they had gone through marriage counseling and they had gone through just counseling as an individual. And they said that the individual counseling had done more for them, their marriage, than the actual marriage counseling, because essentially what was happening was the marriage counseling was just piggybacking off of the individual.
Yep.
And so really, if you just cut that out and just do this and you come together, it's everything. And we've said this, you and I, many times, it's an internal thing. You got to work on the inside of you, and then the rest will just kind of fall in place.
Yeah, and actually that was Lauren Chesmore that actually brought that up and talked about that, which was, this is very profound, because it's like, I'm saying it, and it's funny because I don't think I shot you over that episode. There was a podcast, or not a podcast, a YouTube video with Dr. Shafel, who was talking on the Mind Valley stage. Vasheen Lakiani runs Mind Valley, and they'll have a stage where speakers will come on. And she was talking about the fact that a lot of where we're at as adults, a lot of our shit that we're dealing with is because it started in our childhood. And so you go through, you grow up as a kid, and you don't get the validation, you don't get heard, and then you get into a relationship, and it's two people that are stunted maturity wise in the relationship department, and they're looking at each other to say, no, I have to be heard. You have to hear me. And so I started laughing and I started hearing that. I was like, oh man. And I told people, I was like, you have to complete yourself. The other person is not there to complete you. They're there to compliment you. And when I heard the audio, I was like, I've been saying this the last month. And so when I send it to people, I'm like, I've already spoken on this, and this was the first time I saw this video. So it's not me coming off of what she stated and whatnot. But it's so interesting just to see how that works. And then she actually talked about too, she's like, when people go see therapists, and this is the thing, if you need to see a therapist because you have a lot of shit that you're dealing with and you're way down at rock bottom, you need somebody to help you up to bring you back to a baseline. So that way you can go find a coach and have that partnership where they can take you from there up to thriving and whatnot. But she's like, a lot of people would end up cutting a lot of sessions out and saving themselves a lot of money if they would go to that first session and be like, yeah, I'm responsible. I am the one that caused whatever. But when you think about it, a lot of people don't want to do that because they're like, nah, I've got to take responsibility. I've got to look in the mirror and say, yep, I have to work on this. I'm the issue. And it's just,
I mean, even that internal stuff sometimes can just be, you're not aware of what happens in your surroundings. Like sometimes there's a difference between, being self-involved or self-centered and focusing on yourself, right? So we're building ourselves, we're building the internal part, and through that we can become aware about the situations and the happenings that are going around us. So when you can do that on a conscious level within you, and then you can start seeing, oh, look how I'm reacting to this situation, and I'm not noticing my wife, or I'm not noticing my husband. I'm more just involved with what's, my workings. But as you do the personal development, you become aware of things that you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And when I was going through my journey in personal development, I really started connecting dots about what I was doing wrong in the relationship to put a barrier between my wife and I. And that, again, I've opening up and seeing what she was needing from me, not so much to complete her, right? But just what she was needing from the relationship. And it was just, I mean, we could probably go on for days about that personal development, what that does for your relationship and for in any relationship is mind blowing.
Yep. And I think it's powerful. But it's also one of those things too, that like going into the next relationship, I know one of my biggest things that I'm looking at going into the next relationship is an individual that has a growth mindset, that is always looking to improve themselves and looking to grow. But that's also come with my journey and where I'm at. It's taken a long time, because I know where I'm at, because I have to laugh. I went on one, this was about 2 years ago. I recall I went on a date with somebody I met online, and she's like, do you think my accent's funny? And she had a Southern accent. And so I was like, no. And she's like, well, people at my work make fun of me for it. I was like, well, why are you letting it bother you? This is who you are.
Right.
But when that brought up, I was like, nope. And so it's one of those things that it's just, I don't know what to say, because I have to remember people are looking at life through their own lens.
Yeah.
But it comes down to that validation piece and wanting everybody to love you and trying to be driven by being validated by everybody else. But I think that's personal development realm that's really helped me out, that it's on me. The relationships are just a complementary piece, and I don't have to worry about it. So if something does happen, then that's on them. If they end up having an expired relationship, they walk out, okay. Cool. I'm not relying on them to complete me.
Right. And that kind of just coincides with your there's the Fuji lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's either you like me for who I am, or you don't.
Yep.
So either you like me because I have an accent, or you don't.
Yep.
I really don't care at this point. No, I only want the people around me, and how much more important is that in a marriage or in a new relationship. It's, look, I've gotten myself to a point where I feel like I'm complete, and that's where the compliment's going to happen. Because either you're going to accept this, or you're not. And when you accept it, then you're on this common plane, and then you're accepting that person for the completeness that they found, and then the completeness that you found, and then that compliment does happen.
Yeah.
And that's just mutual respect, and that's really, like, if you think about it, that I think a lot of relationships they don't have the mutual respect.
Yep. And I think because in Jay's book, he had talked about, he went and listened to this monk speak, and the guy had spoken that you have to be mindful that planting trees under whose shade we do not plan to sit. And I look at this aspect now with my journey and my two daughters, working with them and helping them with that mindset piece. That way it impacts my great-great-great-grandchildren times 6 when I'm not around.
Right.
Because it had passed down, and I'm planting that flag as a legacy to say this is no more. This is what's going to take place going forward. And it's just one of those powerful things and whatnot. But I think it's also the awareness piece. Yeah. And so you have to be mindful about focusing on the root cause and not try to focus on all the branches and leaves and whatnot. It's focusing on the root cause of what's going on. Right. And a lot of the root causes are self. As always, over there barking.
She never barks.
Sorry about that. So that's going to be extremely loud. So wait, there's people out there right now. So goodness.
But that's straight. She never barks. I don't know.
She's got to protect the house, man.
She's just saying, speak the truth, Scott. Speak the truth.
But I find it funny too, because you'll start coming into relationships, and my whole shift has really helped out. I come true to myself to the table, and you'll come across people that will be like, why are you showing me kindness when I don't deserve it? And it's those interesting parts when you listen to how people speak. Mm-hmm. And then you'll hear them joke, and you'll be like, you've got to be very cautious on this. Mm-hmm. I understand it's a joke. And we try to make comedy, we try to bring comedy to everything to lessen the blow. But I'm like, your subconscious mind does not know if this is good, bad, or good joke or bad joke. Right. It's going to look to find things to answer your joke and show you, if you say you're a piece of garbage, hey, here you go. Here's all the reasons.
Well, and the other aspect of that is they'll say that and they'll go, oh, I was just kidding. No, you weren't. Mm-hmm. Because that knee-jerk response that just came out, that is you. That is what you have ingrained in your mind already, in your subconscious mind. You believe that about yourself, jokingly or not. That part comes from your heart, right? So this happened just last night. Somebody said something. Says, "Well, I didn't mean to say that." Yeah, you did. I mean, because
you gotta love that.
I mean, because when it comes out that way, that's coming from here, right? Mm-hmm. Or your subconscious aspect. So why do people feel like, and where did it come from? Where was like, I'm just a piece of crap and I don't deserve it, or whatever that is? Sure you do. Stop telling yourself you don't, because you do. Everybody does. I mean, and people are going to argue, well, what about the person that killed 12 people? All right, we can split hairs here, but I mean, in general, people in relationships, you both deserve to be happy. You both deserve the best in life. Yep. You both are great. We are all made great. Mm-hmm. And so we all need to get back to that greatness.
Yeah. And it goes back to the whole, you've got to really question your belief system. You've got to look and see what stories you're telling yourself. That paradigm that's in your head, that somebody else shifted, somebody that shoved it into your head and said, no, this is what you're going to believe. This is good for you. And it's just a sad part. But that's the thing, though, too, with love. We have Disney and you have all the TV shows, and it doesn't help out because your vision of love could be what you saw with your parents. Right. And so you're like, well, I don't know what's right. I don't know what's true.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, and that's true. Like how are we programmed when it comes to relationships? What are we mapping that out to be? And that's where I think it comes into play of what you were saying is don't worry about what your parents had or what Aladdin has or whatever. What is it you want from that relationship? And build it from there. Like create your perfect relationship instead of just trying to mimic what other people have, because what may have been working for them isn't going to work for you. I mean, we're all individuals, but so create the perfect marriage.
Yep. And I think that's powerful too. But then people will be like, well, how's it going to happen? I was like, you don't know how it's going to happen. Just know your what and the why.
Yeah.
The how will happen. But it's one of those things that I always tell people. I'm like, your thoughts lead to feelings. Your feelings lead to actions. Your actions lead to results.
Yeah.
And so if you have these thoughts that you're not worthy, you don't deserve it, you're going to feel bad about yourself. You're going to feel like, why do I need to do anything? And then your actions, you're going to go out there and start. If you don't do the shifts, you're going to start attracting the same shit that you dealt with before. And then you're going to be like, well, what's going on here? Like, why am I in the same relationship that I just got out of?
Right.
And then your results, you're going to be like, this sucks. I hate life. I hate all relationships. I'm not meant to be loved. I'm not meant to be in a relationship. But this is the thing. Like, people have to understand, too, as humans, we're social creatures. But it also comes down to the fact, too, though, that we were in tribes. And so your tribe, you had different individuals in your tribe for different things. I think a lot of times we look at our spouse or our romantic partner to be that person that fills everything. And I'm like, you can't put the onus on somebody like that. Like, you've got your friends for a reason. Coming from a male, female, being a guy, like, your male friends are going to give you a different light, different perspective than your female romantic partner.
Right.
But I think that's the other thing too, is like, we've got to the point where like everybody's the end all be all and all this and that. And I'm like, that's not how this works. We got to understand our tribe mentality, and you got to build your tribe.
Yeah.
Because maybe your romantic partner, your spouse, hasn't dealt with it before. Maybe they've had a different life experience that they've never known what's going on. And so I think that's the other thing, though, is looking and saying, okay, is somebody holding space for you? Even if they don't understand the empathy aspect, but you also have to hold space for yourself, and you got to give yourself grace and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that I just look, and when I see different things, like people are getting upset, crying, and they're like, why I'm not getting the same thing? It's like, well, are you working on yourself? Are you doing the work? And that's the toughest part, because doing the work, you're like, now I've got to go look and say, okay, what did I do wrong?
Right.
What do I need to grow from? What do I need to bring into the next relationship? But that can be a tough piece.
Yeah. Well, so again, it's just a mindset thing. What you said, your feelings are going to produce actions, and the actions are going to produce the results. But then what's the layer on top of that? It's what you're focusing on is what's producing the feelings, right? Because it's your conscious thoughts are being impressed in your subconscious, which generates the feelings, which brings the actions, which gives you the results. So if we're continuously focusing on the fact that we're not worthy, or we're only worthy enough for this certain type of relationship, then that cyclic action is going to bring you that same exact relationship. And so it all goes back to what we were just saying, right? What is it you want? What kind of relationship do you want to create? And then focus on that relationship, and then say, okay, this is what I want. What kind of personal development do I need to go there? And then with those things, and I always say, when you start to focus on your dreams and your wishes and your ambitions and your desires, what happens is the feelings are different, because those conscious thoughts are pressing on your subconscious, which generate the feelings of anticipation, of excitement, of gratitude, of all those good feelings that really drive the results and the actions to give you the results that you need to get that relationship that you want. And it's just where are you placing your focus on? What's your conscious thoughts working on? And if it's going to be on that negative aspect, you're going to get negative in return. If you're going to go for the positive, you'll get the positive in return.
Well, and I think it's funny because, well, not funny, but interesting, because my mom is really big into following the teachings of Neville Goddard. And so he talks about the fact that what you're thinking of and whatnot is actually you're pushing yourself out onto other people. And so if you've got these negative thoughts about yourself, you're pushing that out onto other people, and that's like a mirroring effect. You're going to find that in other people.
Right.
And so, but it all goes back to the mindset piece.
It does. And I think people just need to understand that. It doesn't matter what you're going through in life, divorce, relationship. I mean, I think it was probably Titus, maybe he talked about it with me, but his whole mindset of going through the divorce would make the divorce aspect so a much easier process of, I just want us both to be safe.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a mindset. But if you go into a divorce going, I'm going to be vindictive, now it's time for revenge or whatever, your divorce is going to be a living hell.
Yeah.
And that's mindset in that aspect. Mindset and okay, well, after the divorce, where do we go? Well, if you're going to believe that you're a failure or you're unworthy, then you're never going to be worthy for anything ever again. So again, it's your mindset. You want success in business. It's your mindset. How everything revolves. Our minds are so flippin' powerful. Yeah. And people don't, we're taught that we're limited in what we can do. But really, if you think about what your thoughts can do for you, I mean, I every time I see a special or read a book or really dive into the science of what our minds do, I just sit and, I'm a pretty spiritual person. So I just sit in awe of the creation that God has done. And like, he has really given us everything we possibly could need to be happy within ourselves. Yeah. But it's all your mindset.
Yeah. And I have to laugh because I actually talked to an individual that used to be a pastor, Dennis Moffitt. He's gone through a divorce. But he was talking about the fact that, and this is also a hard-pressed issue too, is with the Christians and whatnot. Everybody's like, divorce is bad, this and that. And like, God didn't intend divorce, but this is like, if you actually do studies, what it was God looked down upon the putting out of the wife without giving the right, saying, hey, I'm tired of you, you pissed me off, get out of here. He's like, what God really hated was the women getting pushed out of the house without that right, because if they didn't get that right, they were stuck ended up becoming prostitutes. And so, but that's the thing, like the Christian faith and whatnot, some of those things that are passed down, because this is the other thing. And so we're getting on this one, but he was talking about with the King James Version. He said that's the worst Bible to study, because King James in England gave a decree of 14 to 16 things to be kept out of the Bible.
Right.
And so it's one of those things that you're like, okay, this is what the Bible's saying. But then think about it too, though. You have pastors that are interpreting it, and you're going to get different interpretations and whatnot. So it's like, which one?
Yeah, I know. And I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. Because I went through the same thing with my divorce of, oh Lord, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say at that time I probably wasn't the most spiritual person, right? I mean, when I ran away from home when I was 16, I did that because I was really trying to escape that aspect, right? I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to do things that were going against what we were, most were being taught in church. So when I went through all that, and so I wouldn't say that I had put God in the forefront of my relationship to begin with. And so that was another aspect of that going, is that why it failed? And because I wasn't this. And I thought sometimes we just overthink things. But, there's an aspect with mine, and nothing really happened. And it's a whole other podcast episode about what was going on in her mind. But we've definitely had some conversations afterwards. Yeah. But she, again, had her own inner work that she had to do, and that she felt like it just wasn't right for her, and so there was this aspect she wanted to go. The Bible says if they want to go, let them go. It doesn't say try to. I tried. I asked, hey, do we want to go to marriage counseling? Blah blah blah. She's like, nope, I just feel like this is what I need to do. And I'm like, cool. And I think from that point, whether it was right or wrong, I just washed my hands of it and said, I'm from now on, I'll just go off and do the best that I can from here on out, you know, but I think too many people, and even afterward, will just focus on the back end of it. We're going, oh, way back when I got a divorce and I did this wrong, and then, okay, great, move on.
And I think so. There's a couple of different things here. So one is the saying that we both heard that a man convinced against his own will is still of the same opinion still. So if you try to convince somebody, you're not going to do anything. They have their opinion, so you can't really convince somebody. And that's where you have to be complete yourself. You got to focus on yourself. But the other thing too is the interesting thing is I was listening to a speaker. Who was it? I'm blanking on it. But he was saying that he was on the plane. Oh, it's Tim's story. He was talking about he sat down next to this gentleman and was talking to him, and he was asking, and he asked the gentleman, he's like, "Are you married or are you single?" He's like, "I'm divorced."
Right. Yeah.
And then he asked him several times, and the guy kept giving him the same answer. And he's like, Tim's like, "Okay, how long have you been divorced for?" 17 years. And so the fact that he's like, think about that person's using that as a crutch to not move forward. And so when I thought about that, I'm like, how often if somebody asks me, are you married or single, how often do I tell them I'm divorced? Because think about it, like you're applying for something, it's like, are you married, single, divorced?
Yeah.
And so there's the option for that.
There's that stigma, like once it's, I'm divorced, so therefore it's like an alcoholic. And I hate to say this, but it's true, right? So, you know, alcoholics, they're forever alcoholics. They go through AA, they kick their addiction, and then years have gone by, and they haven't touched a drop, but they still label themselves as an alcoholic. Well, so what point in time does it come to, I've reset that button. I'm not. Yes, I'm divorced for so long, but so when do you say, "Oh, I'm single"?
That's where you got to make that determination. But that's the other thing too. It's interesting because you'll hear people that will be like, "Hey, this person, I know this person. They've got divorced. They go into another relationship. They seem to be happy. When is it my time? When does that happen?" And I'm like, you've got to look at it. And that's work that you have to do, and your body and your mind is going to determine when. Okay, you're ready. But it's also, I think it comes down to the thoughts again. It's like, here you go. Your mind's going to say, nope, you're not ready. You've got to learn something here. But that can be a tough thing for people because we're such in a society of comparing.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you're right. And I think it is that the more you tell yourself, again, your thoughts, the more you tell yourself you're not ready, you're not going to be. And so Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. It's really, what is it you think? So if you feel like you want to have a relationship and you keep telling yourself that you're not ready, you're never going to be ready. When you get that feeling, go with the feeling and say, cool, I got the feeling, I'm ready. Yep. And when you start telling yourself that you're ready, you'll be ready.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's like, you'll see these rules of dating, like, oh, if you get somebody's number, wait 3 days. It's like, what? Get out of here with that bullshit. But it's one of those things that it's like, hey, this is the rule of society. Let's follow it. It's like, screw with that. That's freaking stupid as you'll ever see.
I agree. I'm like, you know what? If you want to call the next day, call the next day. If that person thinks that you're now or what's the word, pathetic or whatever, then so be it. Then you don't need them.
Well, then I've heard it said, because you'll have a lot of people, especially for females, it's like, let me play hard to get. I'm like, why? If you like the guy, don't play hard to get. But it's this whole stigma and the crazy ass stupid shit.
Well, but stupid is that the guy, because they have to play the game because that's the rules that society has set out. And so we all, well, I shouldn't say we all, because we don't, right? Because we've changed our mindset, but the vast majority plays within the rules that society gives us.
Yeah.
But that's not those really, there are no rules. There isn't. We make our own rules. Again, think of it up here of what you want, go out and get what it is you want.
It's just funny, but this is also my thought process. So I may be on my own island for everything, which is okay. You either love me or hate me, but there's no in between with me. So you know where I stand with you.
Yeah.
And there's been times that like I'll just speak the truth, and I'm like, if you don't like it, well, you gotta look and see why you don't like it. If I'm speaking the truth and you're like, that sucks and that's so stupid. Well, why does it suck and why is it stupid?
I do remember as a kid in the church that there's something that always stuck out to me that was you can tell when it's the truth because it rubs you wrong. And so when you feel like this uncomfortableness, that's something that's going against somewhat of a lie. So I mean, it's just that you just judge that on there. So you're like, oh, I don't like that. It's probably because it's the truth, and so you need to change something.
It's good times. It's good times. So now we got, of course, as we run through the pod decks. So we've got these out here. We'll run through them very easy. Anybody that does live stream broadcasting, is thinking about getting into podcasting, or you're already doing it, I highly suggest getting these tools here, pod decks. I know I've got a code that you can utilize. It's 10% off of your first order. It's Let's Go 26. But I know Travis has come out with a web-based application that you can download. Apple's already got it. Android should be out the 27th of November, of what he's saying. But in there, it's got like 12 decks. So for what we have physically, it's 5 decks and whatnot. So, but it's funny because I've watched videos that you've done, and usually I'll watch a little bit and then I'll scroll through and whatnot, and then I'll get to them because I love watching that stuff. Because you'll watch people and their reactions. Right. They're like, "What is this?"
I think it's cool, like the pod deck things, and I'm actually glad you introduced them to me because it does take it to a different level. But it's really strange how the questions, as random as they are, will always end up coming back around to whatever the topic was. Yeah. And it's so, I mean, I have yet to get an outlandish one. So maybe that's just it, but
that could be why. So the first one that I pulled here it's the interview deck. What things do you do every day that you wish could be automated?
So there's a lot. So cooking, if I wish there would be if Star Trek could come to reality where we could just walk up and say, I want this, and it was just happen, that would be awesome. And then dishes, I know we have dishwashers and that's automated, but I still have to load it.
Yeah.
And I have kids, and so sometimes they can do it, but when they're not around, it's something I got to do. And I could be reading books, I could be doing whatever, rather than cooking food and doing dishes. So those would be the two things that
I think with everything that I do now. I think doing the live streaming, doing the podcast. Ultimately, the thing that if I could automate it was being able to take the thoughts that I have to give the titles and to do the editing and all that, just do it that way so I don't have to worry about that. Right now, I think that would be the things that if I could automate, that's what it would be, because it would be a lot less work. But it's okay. So I enjoy it because it's the creative process and whatnot. But it's very interesting when you start looking. But going back to your cooking aspect, you have subscription services that put everything together for you. You just have to still cook it.
That's true. And that's just, I don't want to say it's a laziness aspect, but there is a little bit of that. I could be doing so many other things, and really, if the kids aren't here, I probably won't cook.
Well, I find it funny too because I know people in the business world and whatnot, and there's people that have nannies. There's people that will professionally prep their meals. Mm-hmm. So there's a way that automates it for you. You still have somebody else doing it for you, but
maybe one day I'll get to that point.
Oh, it's coming. We already know. So let's see here. So these are funny. So what technology do you wish existed?
Can we go back to the Star Trek in making my food situation? That's the technology I want. So I don't know. I utilize. Well, I shouldn't say I utilize. I've been finding a lot of technologies that actually already exist that have been making my life a lot easier. Right. So, writing this new book, with Google Speak, and you can just talk and it types it out. I don't know that I wish there was something that existed. I wish that it would be improved upon. Like I wish those voice things would actually listen to pauses and add commas and periods instead of just doing these run-on sentences that last forever. Because to me it's like then I still have to go back in and do that. But I mean that's I don't know. Maybe I'm just way overthinking that. But I think that would be. Because I don't know, like the more I read and the more I start writing for books and stuff, the more I really enjoy doing that.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can talk through it, and I feel like that really gets the emotion out. But then it doesn't, and it's easier. But then I have to go back through and add that all in there.
Yeah.
And then you start second guessing what it is you said. Like, oh, maybe I should rearrange that word because I don't know.
Well, it's just like when I write my notes, my writing's so small that I'll start reading and I'll be like, I think it says this, and then I'm like, nope, scratch that, I gotta go back. And so Miriam's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm reading my writing, and it needs to get a little bit bigger and whatnot.
Yeah, it does. I've seen your writing. It's a little. If you need a microscope to see what it is that you said.
Little magnifying glass.
Not even a no, it's even too small for a magnifying glass.
With the technology that existed. Ultimately, like if we could get it to where we have these like the banking tubes where you put the money in there and it sucks up, if we could have that where we could just get shot up through the tubes to like Denver, whoo, buddy, like that would cut out a lot. But it's like these futuristic technologies and whatnot for me. But yeah, it's interesting just to see like things that are coming into fruition and whatnot, like virtual reality, and we have to deal with artificial intelligence, which that's a funny thing. They're like, why do you want to deal with something that the name is artificial intelligence? It's made up intelligence.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing and whatnot, but I think right now just decreased travel and whatnot, like especially flying overseas, that takes so long.
So you're wanting kind of that the Polar Express. Where have you seen that movie with your girls?
Yeah.
Where they jump into some little turbo pod thing that takes them. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But it's interesting. It's funny, but you know what? Like that's where you can start dreaming and start creating your realities. But that's also where you start thinking about the audacious, hairy goals that everybody looks at you like they're crazy. This is funny because I was listening or reading, and they were talking about the Wright brothers. And so when they talk about flying, their dad was a priest or pastor, and he's like, humans aren't meant to fly. You're going to go to hell if you fly. Imagine if they would have listened to their dad. We wouldn't have airplanes. Yeah, so it's one of those interesting things. So now, and I find this funny because this has not been opened yet, so it took me a little bit to open it. It's the
Which one are those?
Would You Rather deck.
Yeah, I haven't done those ones yet.
So, would you rather wear a onesie 24/7 for a year or a horse head costume for a month straight?
That's funny. So my daughter came over. She dropped my grandson off, and they were going to a Halloween party on Friday. And she came back to pick him up. She goes, "Man, all these people were in onesies, and they looked so comfortable." And the more I thought about that, like I've never, as an adult, I haven't worn a onesie since I don't even know when. I don't even remember. But I think I'd go with that because watching the little kids run around in those onesies, they do seem pretty comfy.
And so we have Danielle McCarthy that commented. She said Jetson tubes for travel, just like the Jetsons.
Oh, yeah.
Jettison tubes.
That's a good one.
Yep. So we got a few things futuristic and whatnot, but also give a shout out to Danielle because she's on the challenge also of doing 30 days of posting. So anybody that is looking for another podcast, check out Danielle's Coffee, Chicks, and Cash. Great information, the female perspective when it comes to money and all that. Just very powerful.
And I'll say this too. Don't let the Coffee, Chicks, and Cash as a guy turn you off because the information I listen to Danielle's podcast and the information that is put out there is just as relevant for the male species and really like I really enjoy, because there's a whole holistic thing when it comes to mindset, right?
Yep.
And so if you want to be completely, tuned in to every aspect, and the finances and the money, that's part of it, right? Because I think it was on the first episode she was talking about, or her guest was talking about, we don't talk about money. It's like this faux pas thing to talk about it.
Yep.
And that's just our mindset. So when we're trying to go for this whole holistic approach of what does success mean, whether it's financially or whether it's through health or whatever, you have to wrap your head around all of it. And her podcast it's an amazing one for that. So
yep.
I fully support people listening to that as well.
Yep. So I'll put that in the comments and also share that, because I know she came on as a co-host, like the fifth episode, if I remember right. We've gone, and I think we're this is episode 27 for the podcast. So she was like she was actually our first guest to come on as a co-host for the podcast. So I'll put that in the show notes, and then I'll update it for the video too with that information. But yeah, check it out and whatnot. And for me, like, I'm going to go either way, but I would much rather have my face free flowing so people can see me smiling, because it's that human connection piece, being able to smile and whatnot, because it's a micro exchange of energy for people when you smile. So I will wear the onesie for a year straight. It's all good. Jasper Axelrad with Tabala, we're going to have her come on the Dreamer Cypher, and she's like, can we wear onesies? And Patrick's like, sure. Patrick's not so game for that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Because we did a spicy chocolate challenge that we did a live stream on. Yeah. So we're also talking about the one chip challenge that, Patrick was not very happy when you go watch that video, because he already did it once. And Sharon's like, hey, you want to do this? I was like, yep, let's go. Patrick was not happy with it. So it's funny. But just very interesting just to get out there and just be yourself and not have any issues of not showing up true to yourself and whatnot. Too many people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So the last one that we have is what the heck questions. I'm excited, though, to be able to download the actual app, because I have an Android, so it's not out until the 27th of November. But one of the decks is How Dare You? So it's like very comedic stuff, and there's like 185 questions in that deck. I was like, all right, here we go. So and then like one's a futuristic deck. So I'm like, more power. So toilet paper, over or under?
Over.
Somebody said there is a schematic or blueprint for the development of toilet paper.
It is.
I look at it, I'm like, as long as I have toilet paper, I'm like, what's the big deal with it going over or under? I'm like, as long as it's there.
I don't know why. That's just the way I just always remembered it being over. So,
are you one of those people that if you go to somebody's house and it's under, like you change it?
I don't, but my ex-wife would. She would flat out tell, "Yep, I'll go in there and I'll rearrange that."
Oh man,
well, cool. I mean, that's one way to cause a lot of stress. I don't know. Yeah, I guess when it comes down to it, though, like as long as you have something to clean yourself up with, does it really matter?
But you can talk about that though too. They've like you have a lot of countries that have bidets, and so they don't have toilet paper. And being an American, you start thinking about that, and you're like, that is so crazy. Like I don't want water shot up my butt and whatnot. But think about it: you're taking toilet paper and you're wiping your butthole with it. What if the toilet paper breaks and then you end up having a finger that drags across?
That's true. Well, and I was reading, I don't remember why, I was reading some stupid history thing about the way things were in the Wild West about hygiene and things, and they didn't have toilet paper. They used, this was quite disturbing, so I apologize, but they used corn cobs, right? And they just reuse the same corn cobs. So, I mean, again, just be happy you have water or toilet paper, and who cares about how it was.
True, but you have arguments that start over this, and I'm like, all right, whatever. That's what you're looking at life and whatnot. But it's just like one of those things that you go look and see like how much water it takes to make toilet paper, make a roll. Somebody said it's like 55 gallons of water to create toilet paper, a roll. So you're using a lot of water to create paper that's going to go flush down the toilet and whatnot. So, but I've talked to people and they're like, I don't want to get water up my butthole. I'm like, well, I think it's a little bit cleaner than you having your fingers right there.
But again, it's just the paradigm that we were raised in. We were raised that that's just for those who utilize it in those countries. That's a common thing for them. They don't know that it's strange.
That's funny.
We feel it's strange, but I mean, really, it just is what it is until we assign something to it.
I have to laugh because I just saw somebody's watching this at this point. So if you're like, what is going on here? Talking about toilet paper, fingers near your butthole and all that. This is how we run things. So like the end of the show is just off the cuff. Here we go. So, but man, appreciate you taking the time to jump on here. If anything else that you want to share, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, because I know you've got your coaching business with the mindset piece, how would they go about to do that?
So there's quite a few ways. So I have the GarrettGoggans.com. You can go there and there's contact information, but really a lot of my stuff is done through the Dr. Garrett Goggans Facebook page. And so you can IM me there. And really, I love people just jump on asking questions. Like, I don't know. It's just, I have the program, but I enjoy the networking aspect of it just as much. And some people don't feel like they need a coach, and that's fine. Let's just get together. We can talk. We can talk about. I mean, that's, I guess, my passion is just turn into this mindset piece. So when I get going, it's fun. But those are the main two avenues. If they're interested in more of the mindset aspect, there is the on the GarrettGoggans.com. They can download the ebook Moving Upstream Without a Paddle, which is what my podcast is based on. Quick read, but and I think there's also my master classes on there. So some good information for them for the mindset piece.
Yep. And I highly suggest people just taking up Garrett on his offer, reaching out to him, talk to him. He's huge on helping individuals with just changing the mindset piece. I've seen the work that he's done on himself. And when he talked about the coach piece, like a lot of people don't think they need a coach, but people have to understand that you have to have that unobjective person that's there to give you gentle accountability, give you a look from the outside in that you may not see. And as coaches, we're not here to tell you what you need to do. This is what you need to do for your life. No, it's asking you questions, because as individuals, we're the hero of our own life. We're the expert of our own life. And so it's just helping you out with that, because having people sit with you just in the shit and just be there for you, that can be huge for you as an individual. So, but thank you guys for your time. If you have any questions, in the show notes, we do have the email that you can reach out to myself and Miriam. It's TJ, so the journey beyond bd0711@gmail.com. You can reach out to us that way. We have our Facebook group, the After Divorce Grace Laughter Lessons, that you can come join. We did have somebody that recently joined from the UK, so I don't know. We have individuals that have listened to the podcast before that are in the UK. So if that's who you are, thank you for jumping on there. Hopefully we can give you that space and that safe space for you. But other than that, looking forward to coming back next week, provide more value, share more tools and whatnot, and just give you this family and this space for you. So we'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah, same for my people. Thank you, Scott. Y'all know how to get in touch with Scott and Miriam now. If you're going through divorce, definitely. I mean, they're the people to reach out to, just because you do need a safe space. And so I listen. I haven't. It's been years since I've gone through my divorce. I still find information in your guys' podcast that I can relate to today. So I strongly encourage reaching out to them, and just know that we're doing 30 days every single day. There's going to be something on these podcasts. So tune in and you can get just inspired or whatever you need from us. So,
yep.
All right.
Let's go.
Let's go.